Greetings and welcome to the Pransform podcast. This is episode 14, and it is Tuesday, November 30th. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio, and welcome back, guys. Kind of hard to believe that it's the last day of November, and that we only have 1 month left in the year. So I can close my eyes real tight and remember exactly what I was doing and where I was on New Year's Day. So 11 months down and 1 to go. So pretty crazy when I think about it like that. But anyway, guys, really welcome back. I know here in the United States we got people coming back from Thanksgiving holiday weekend, getting ready for the next round of holidays in December. So I think, the reason I even mention that is because this is traditionally the time of year where a lot of people just reassess what's going on with their life from a lot of different perspectives. I mean, whether it's personal life or business life or financial life or all those things combined, whatever the case might be. For small business owners, I think December, especially, here in the States and all, it's a time to think ahead, think to the new year. The work pace definitely, for small businesses, the work pace really never slows down, but I would just say collectively as an economy in the United States, as each day goes by in December, you see kind of a lessening pace work-wise and sort of a quickening pace in terms of preparing for holiday vacations, get-togethers, events, et cetera, et cetera. So December provides that sort of, maybe the right word isn't breather, but it provides that moment or two to kind of say, okay, well, what are we doing? Where are we going with the business? What trajectory is the business on? What are we trying to accomplish in the new year? It really kind of affords you sort of a window to start doing that. And I think one of the areas that I want to focus on in this podcast, the subject of this podcast is whether or not to outsource your bookkeeping. So it's a little bit on the specific side. But I wanted to drill down into that because bookkeeping is often seen as, I think a lot of small business owners would agree with me. I've done it myself before. It's considered an onerous, kind of boring, repetitive, constant task. It never goes away. Obviously the books need to be maintained all the time on some kind of schedule or some kind of pace. Where they're always up to date or they're not lagging too far behind. You can run reports out of them. You can see the health of your business out of those reports. So they're very important in a lot of ways, but they're often just mind-numbingly, time-consuming. Again, like I said, repetitive, especially if you have a lot of transactions that rotate through your business monthly or weekly or, bi-monthly or whatever the case is. So it's not fun. It's not something anybody, I think, really looks forward to, but it's very necessary, and it's very critical to the health of your business. So I think this time of year really affords an opportunity to look at things like that and say, okay, as we pick apart the pieces of our business, which pieces are working well, which pieces are we going to keep working on, let's say, personally, which ones might we outsource or get some help on, hire people for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think the timing of this subject and this point in the year go well together. So we thought it was a good topic here for episode 14. And I think the number one thing I want to say as we delve into, if you say, well, Chris, I'm doing my own bookkeeping. I know how to do it. Why would I need anybody else to do it? Okay, so I'm really talking to the audience that is hopefully doing bookkeeping. If you're not doing it at all, that's a whole other conversation. Convincing you that it needs to be done. Or maybe you're already convinced and you haven't gotten around to it. But I think, there are already businesses out there that have figured out that while they need their books, and their books are very important, they don't need to be the ones doing them, so they've already outsourced it. They've already brought in outside help or whatnot. I'm kind of zoning in on those individuals who know it's important. They're doing it. It's happening for their business, but they're the ones that are doing it. Like the business owner or the founders of the business are still doing their own books. And I think, this is where there are a lot of different reasons why you might consider, outsourcing your bookkeeping. I think there's, in fact, I'm definitely not going to cover them all in this episode, okay, although I am going to tick through a bit of a list. But the real overarching reason is it's the time versus money argument. Okay? Now, before I get into that, before we pick that apart a little bit, I do want to say this. And I'm speaking in many ways from personal experience and also just talking to other business owners and stuff like that, is I think that when you start a business, you should do your own books. Like, you should start off doing your own books. You should not start off like, hey, I started a business on Monday and I outsourced the books to somebody on Tuesday. Okay? Being a little bit extreme there, but you should do your own books in the beginning. Long enough, and I'm not going to give you an exact time frame because it differs for everybody, but long enough to understand the rhythm and flow of finances and money and transactions and charges and profit and loss reports and on and on and on, that you get a sense of that and you get a feel for that and you understand the mechanics of that. And I think the reason that's important, you say, well, Chris, if the whole episode is about why I might want to outsource, why do I need to ever do it? I hate it. I don't like it. I don't even know how to do it, or whatever your explanation is. And so I think the reason that it's important is because when you get to the point where you're hiring somebody, you kind of want to know what it is they're doing. You kind of want to know when they're telling you certain things, why they're telling you those things, what things maybe they're not telling you. Like, hey, they're reporting on X, Y, and Z, but they're not reporting on A, B, and C. Why not? To catch errors, to be able to see, like, okay, I hired somebody. Let me check the last few months' transactions and see if it's actually, if they're actually doing it correctly and accurately. Okay, so really, I think that when you start a business, and I mean, so many of you are going to, I think, resonate with this, but when you start a business, you're everybody, right? Your marketing, your bookkeeping, your accounting, your taxes. You're the person actually delivering the service, whatever your service might be, or you're the person shipping the product. I mean, you literally wear every single hat. And, that's the beauty of starting your own business, is you've literally taken on that entire responsibility on your own, and you get the perks, quote unquote, that go with that. Obviously, they don't always come right away, but you have the perks of being your own boss and determining all those things and how they happen and when they happen and why they happen, etc. So really, I would have to say, if you're a business owner who's just beginning, or maybe you've begun a while ago and you've never done your own books, getting into those books and understanding what's going on there is critical. Okay, so you should absolutely know what you're doing there, look at what you're doing in your books and get a grasp of it and understand why things happen the way they happen, at least at a basic level. Okay, I mean, at a bare minimum, at a basic level. So, having said all that, now you come to a point, whatever that point is for you, a month, 6 months, a year, whatever, where now you're going to outsource and you're going to hand it off to somebody. And so what is the major reason that you do that? And I think the major reason that you have to eventually consider doing the outsourcing of bookkeeping and other accounting functions, the number one macro reason is the cost of your time. So you eventually reach a point in your business where, you've got to keep cash pumping through your business. You have to keep revenue coming in to cover expenses. Otherwise, you're going into your own pockets. You're using your own capital as an individual to fund your business, or you're going into debt and you're using lines of credit and so forth, whether it's personal credit cards, business credit cards, if it's a mess, whatever the case might be. If you don't keep cash pumping through your business, you have a big problem that's going to be growing underfoot. So the time versus money argument centers on that. There comes a point where 1 hour of your time selling your service or product dwarfs, impact-wise, whatever you're saving by doing your books. Okay, so if you can hire a bookkeeper in the United States for $100, an hour, or $200 an hour, or you send it overseas to a company like ours, to Pransform, where we do it for $19 an hour. No matter what that amount is, if your business is functioning even remotely properly, then an hour of your time spent pushing your product or your service into the marketplace and closing deals and making sales absolutely overcomes any advantage you've gained by taking bookkeeping in-house. And when I say in-house, I mean in-house to yourself. Okay? So, I mean, this is obvious stuff. I mean, you guys deal with this all the time. I mean, this is something as a business owner, that analysis probably comes naturally to you now. You probably analyze everything that way. If I spend an hour on this versus if I spend an hour, directly selling my product and closing deals, what's the ROI? So you're always going through those calculations, and I think if you haven't done that calculation yet for your books, you have to think to yourself, well, what can I save if I wasn't doing the books? What can I save, time-wise that can then be applied elsewhere versus what am I saving money-wise? Okay, now, one argument I think I can anticipate that you guys might have on this, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, and it's not incorrect, is that a lot of these bookkeeping programs, you can automate the bookkeeping. So just about every single transaction, particularly if it's a recurring transaction, can just get booked automatically into into the books. Okay, and it just basically fills itself out. Okay, and then if you have sort of an out of the ordinary expense, you go in and one-off that, or enter it on your own time or whenever you get a chance. And so I understand that, and I think that's something to look at. I think actually you should consider that. If you have a robust enough platform that, let's say, connects directly to your bank account and can import transactions, take a look at it. Now, personally, I have used QuickBooks Online that has been connected to bank accounts, and I still had to go in and clean up transactions. I still had to go in and change the description, make sure that everything was accurate in terms of the date and the timing and the amount. But in particular, the worst part of it was that it was drawing in these descriptions from the bank account that were like hieroglyphics. I mean, they were just completely non-understandable at first glance. Okay, and certainly wouldn't have been understandable years later if you had to go back and look at transactions and be like, well, what was I doing in 2017 in June with this particular transaction? You wouldn't understand what you had done based on the imported description from QuickBooks. It was just too, it was too arcane. So there's still some manual labor there, even when you do the automatic transfer, at least in my personal experience. Okay, so that's just kind of a heads up to you guys if you're considering that, if you're thinking about doing it that way. That's something to think about, is that you still have to go in and do cleanup. You still have to go in and verify transactions oftentimes from a description standpoint. Okay, so we talked about the time versus money argument. We talked about automating the process. A couple of specific things, and then we'll wrap this podcast up, that I just wanted to point out. Some sort of tactical areas that you may or may not be dealing with in your business, but if you are, there's probably a case to be made that outsourcing it would be, or having somebody on the team who does that for a living, who's totally focused on accounting and bookkeeping, can help you with. And one of the number one things a lot of people face when they start a business is writing a business plan. Okay. Now, I admit, based on what I said earlier, that oftentimes, if not every time, you should be doing your own books at the beginning. Okay, and you shouldn't necessarily have somebody on board doing it for you from day one. And oftentimes you're writing your business plan from day one because you're starting your business off the business plan. And so I get that, but if you are in a situation where, let's say, you're developing that business plan on a rolling basis, let's say you just wanted to get your business started, and then you're going to flesh that business plan out over time because you've got it in your head and you're just putting it down on paper now. Well, eventually, as you bring an accountant on board / bookkeeper, you probably want to run that business plan by them. You want them to see the numbers, the projections, any financial pieces of that puzzle that you've put together. You want to give them a crack at it. Okay, so that's just something to consider. I know not everybody does a business plan. I mean, it's arguable whether it's critical or not to do one. Some would say it's just slowing you down and giving you an excuse not to start, and others would say, no, you absolutely have to do one. You have to think everything through, and you have to put it down on paper. Well, if you're the latter category, I would say it is advisable at some point to have an accountant put their eyeballs on your business plan. Okay, so that's number one, just on this sort of laundry list of tactical level reasons. Another reason you want an accountant to look at your situation, to be involved with your business, besides just logging transactions in your books, would be for your legal structure, your entity structure. Are you set up correctly? Do you have the right kinds of legal entities, corporations, LLCs, whatever the case might be? It's not to say that every accountant is great at that. You should probably interview your accountants and your bookkeepers, obviously, on things like this before you hire them. But they often are at least familiar enough where they're going to have better advice and better orientation than you would have. Okay, and of course, if you have a really outstanding one, they can probably just handle the whole thing for you, and it's something that just would sort of naturally fall under their business offering. Okay, but your legal structure and how you are set up is ultra critical to making sure your business doesn't fail down the road due to some unforeseen issue or circumstance. Okay, so we already kind of talked about finances. I mean, we talked about doing the books, keeping things updated, bank transactions, etc. So I won't go into that too much all over again. Another area, and I actually am going to do two side by side here, is dealing with the government and being audited. And a lot of people would say they're one and the same. Like if I'm dealing with the government, I'm probably being audited. Well, maybe not. But having somebody who's in the profession, who's on your team, who can both help you prepare for meetings with the government and or audits, and who can also be potentially present with you when you deal with the government or deal with audits. I mean, it makes a huge difference if you have somebody who's completely focused on your financial picture, who then does a lot of that talking, or at least a lot of that preparation with you to do that talking with that government official, with that, with that auditor, or whoever it might be. Okay? So just think about that. I mean, if you just close your eyes and picture it, do you want to sit across from the IRS auditor and explain everything in your books and your finances? Or would it be helpful if your accountant/bookkeeper was with you? Or at the very least, if you had met with them first and they got you completely spun up and then you felt that much more confident with your auditor, who oftentimes, at least I've been told this, don't know it from experience yet, is that the more you give an auditor and the more tight your situation is up front, the more likely they are to close your case and move on to the next one, because they just don't feel like they're going to find anything or they're going to have any issues with you, so they usually rapidly close you out and move on to the next one. Okay? So just think about that, guys, in terms of support and having somebody with you to deal with situations like that. And the last one I'll just mention before we conclude is take what happened in 2020 here in the States with like the PPP loans, getting business loans from the government to deal with pandemic-related economic impacts. I mean, basically, and there was a lot of fraud that occurred with those things. I mean, a lot of people misstepped, used the loans improperly, didn't deploy them the way they were supposed to. Having somebody on your team who understands how things like that are supposed to be conducted, or how they certainly should show up in your books, is an enormously helpful dimension to bringing in this kind of help from the outside. Heard stories, saw them in the news, people who took these loans sometimes purposefully, in which case can't help them, but also unwittingly made errors and mistakes in deploying these funds. And they just, in many cases, most likely, didn't have very good advice, or just operated on their own judgment in terms of what they thought was correct, and that turned out to be not the case. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to give you guys some examples there, from the business plan to the auditing to business loans, whatever the case might be, where you can start to envision, like, okay, as my business really gets rolling, these are things that you're not necessarily envisioning on day one of your business. I mean, you don't start your business and then start worrying about an audit on day two. But as your business has existed, for some time, and it's been active and it's been involved in transactions and making revenue and paying out expenses, these things are going to come into focus. Like, you guys are going to start to realize, like, okay, wait a second, like, yeah, I might have to deal with tax situations down the road. I might have to deal with audits. I might have to take loans from the government or a bank or wherever I get it from, a private loan. These are things that I don't want to handle improperly or just guess at. I have to be correct. I have to make sure that they're done properly. So I think that whole factor of just getting you your sleep back because you don't have to worry about these things, and putting them into the hands of professionals who they make an entire living out of doing these things. There's just a trade-off there, and there's an ROI to that that's both measurable and I think immeasurable. Okay, so what I want to do, guys, I want to wrap it up here about the 20-minute mark. If you guys have any questions about outsourcing, bookkeeping, accounting functions, how that works, what's included, what's not, feel free to reach out to us. I mean, you can come over to our Facebook page, LinkedIn page, Pransform, and drop us a note there. You can go to the website. You can, leave a comment here. But, to be honest with you guys, it's something that I think if your business has been going for a little while now, you should at least take a look at it. You should at least look at the economic impact of shifting that lower cost task and low ROI task over to moving your time into higher ROI activities. Okay? So, again, we'd love to answer any questions, help you out with that, give you a quote, take a look at your situation, see if we can help you out if you're interested in using us to do this function for your business. Okay, guys? So, anyway, everybody have a great end of November. I will see you guys later this week at the beginning of December. We'll be publishing on December 2nd, episode 15. So check back again for that, guys. We appreciate all the support that you guys give the podcast, the likes, the shares, the subscribes. We definitely appreciate it. Please do that when you get a chance, when you come over here to our podcast, to do at least one of those three. And we certainly appreciate you following us on Facebook and LinkedIn. So in the meantime, Christopher Anastasia, I'm going to go ahead and sign off of episode 14. You guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.